What really matters, I guess, today is the fact that I've been a licensed site evaluator for about 44 years, plus or minus. So I've been playing around in the dirt and other stuff for a long time. And I'm a scientist, so one of the things that is really important to me is understanding how things work and why they work and why they may not work. So I'm going to share with you some things today that you won't necessarily hear from many other folks, but I think that they're very important for both septic systems and lake water quality. Not the sexiest subject in the world, but for all of you who live in rural Maine, you all have one of these things. And they're pretty important because they serve a very valuable function, and they're not cheap to replace if you have to, so knowing something about them is quite handy. And as you know, I'm sure all of you here are very concerned about what the color of the water in your lake is. Some people wonder why a septic system's not in the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And obviously protecting natural resources like lakes, ponds, streams, etc. And fish are important. We remember down in Lake Auburn a while ago there was a fish kill when we had a really warm year and there was a lack of oxygen. But human health threat is the primary concern with septic systems, and that's why it's the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Environmental Quality, that has jurisdiction over septic system in the state. Lots of things in wastewater that are not nice, and we want to make sure we take care of those and they don't have any effect on people besides lake water quality. Now, I'm sure most of you know what a septic system is. I'm going to go over briefly what they are because there's lots of different kinds of products out there today. There's a septic tank and a drain field are the two primary components. The distribution box spreads the water out over the drain field more or less uniformly. The standard drain field was always made with crushed rock. And the footprint is pretty big because the purpose of the stone in a drain field is what? Anybody know what it is? What's that?
To distribute.
No, it's to hold the water because, you know, a standard 3-bedroom home generates about 300 gallons of wastewater per day. But when is it generated? In the morning when everybody gets up and gets ready for school and work, and when they come home. So you put a lot of water out there, and probably faster than the ground can absorb it, so you gotta have a place to put it. So in a stone bed, half the volume is stone and the other half is pore space, and that's what it is. It's basically to hold water until it can drain into the ground. Septic tanks, those have been around for a very long time, and they're very simple and they're very effective. Their purpose is to collect things that are in the water that are heavier than water that sink to the bottom, and things that are lighter than water and they float to the top. There's a baffle on the inlet end. That's designed to slow the velocity of water down when it comes into the tank so it doesn't stir things up. And then at the outlet end, that baffle is extremely important because if that's not there, all that grease and stuff goes out into your drain field. So by all means, every time you have a septic tank pumped, make sure they check the outlet baffle because that is critical to the functioning of a septic system. And if that is concrete and it corrodes and falls off, it's really easy to fix it with a pipe, 2 pieces of plastic pipe making it into a T. A piece comes out here, a piece comes up here, a joint goes up a little bit above here, and not a problem. But without that, your drain field will fail. The other thing people don't understand about septic tanks is that they're not designed to remove all the particles in the waste stream. They remove a lot, but not all of it. For one thing, the effluent in the tank becomes anaerobic, and so decomposition is slow. So you need to pump it out every 3 to 5 years. If you don't do that, your $10,000 or $20,000 drain field system may fail. So pumping it out a little more often than less often is a great idea. And they make plastic septic tanks if you happen to be in a tight spot that's hard to get at and you can't get a concrete tank in. And a lot of septic tanks these days have filters on the outlet end. The purpose is to remove some of the fines, particles that might escape out into the drain field. My personal opinion of those septic tank outlet filters is mixed. If they put a filter in fine enough to really remove most of the particles, it would plug up so often that you'd have to have it cleaned constantly and people wouldn't do that. So they're a little bit too coarse. I think if you understand your septic system well and how it works, then they're not as important, but they don't do any harm. So, and most septic tank manufacturers, that's standard in the tank. And the distribution box, you know, it's designed so that water goes out each of the pipes into your drain field, hopefully equally. In reality, most of these distribution boxes tip a little bit, so they don't really distribute it equally, and it's really not that critical. In my opinion, their biggest function is an inspection port. There's not supposed to be grease and junk in these things. So if you've got a septic system that's made out of plastic chambers or concrete chambers or something that somebody can't dig a hole in to look at easily, if you get a distribution box and it's full of stuff, then you know you got a real problem. That's not supposed to happen. I mentioned that. This is a typical stone bed with the piping in it. Water comes in and goes over the whole footprint of the disposal field eventually. And a lot of people don't realize this, but that is a septic system. And that's a same thing as a drain field for the black waste, and that works just as well as the drain field. In fact, it's a better system than a septic system drain field, because the way that contaminants move from one place to another is with water, right? You gotta have water. Well, if you got this little building sitting up on top of the ground, so rain doesn't even get at it, then the stuff sits there and composts, and it's actually superior. So people say, all I have is an outhouse, I don't have a septic system. You have as good a septic system as there is, in my opinion. But that's only half your system. You still got to get rid of the gray water, the sink water, the showers, the bath water, and that's probably not one of the ones in the septic system rules, but so you still got to have something like that. The septic system design that we use today was first started in July 1st of 1974. And we call it site evaluation because people are trained to go out and look at conditions and not do what we did back in the good old days, which was a PERC test. And for a PERC test, you dug a hole in the ground, you filled it up with water, and you timed how fast the water disappeared. Believe it or not, if you dug the hole in the ground last year, it probably disappeared faster than it does this year because it's wet, or the spring, or the fall. So that system, you know, if you went out in April and did a PERC test and it didn't pass, you said, well, I'll come back in August and do it now, it'll pass. And that doesn't work because your septic system has to be functional all year long. So today, we train folks to be able to look at soil colors and other features and be able to tell how it'll work all year, including in the spring when the water table is high. So, I just mentioned that. The things that we look at are soil texture. Obviously, a septic system on clay soil is going to drain slower than on sand. We look at soil structure. Water goes through the soil through soil pores. And soil pores are created by soil structure. If you don't have good soil structure, you don't have a lot of pores, and the water can't go through the ground very easily. So healthy soil with good soil structure is really important. And I train contractors how to put in septic systems. And one of the things I try to get them to do is make sure that they don't destroy the structure. And for those of you if you're having a septic system put in my opinion, if you can do it, wait until the driest time of year, because the soil structure can be destroyed quite easily when there's a lot of moisture in the ground, because moisture is a lubricant. But when the soil is dry, it's very strong. Everybody here knows or feels that if you drove out into it this spring, you would never be seen again. But if you drive out of it in August, you could drive a tank out, right? Hards of rock. So soil structure is really critical. Soil consistency means whether you got a hard pan or not. Soil depth, how far is it to bedrock a hard pan? And soil drainage is how wet is the soil and how long is the water in the soil. So all these things are important to know when you're designing a septic system. And a little quick lesson in soil morphology. All of our soil in Maine, and pretty much most everywhere in the country, has a lot of iron in it. And if the iron is exposed to oxygen, it rusts. That's what that bright color is all about. It's rusted iron. So if you got soil with bright colors and good roots, you got a soil that's well drained, there's not a water table, that's a good one to put in for a septic system. On the other hand, if the water table is there for any length of time, microbes that are breaking down organic matter in the soil, they need oxygen. They get it from the soil air and the soil pores if they can, because that's the easiest place. If the water table comes up in the soil and it's not there for too long, there's oxygen in that water, that's the next easiest place for microbes to get it. If they use up all that oxygen, the next easiest place to get it is the rust, which is FeO2 and FeO3. They take the oxygen away. When they take the oxygen away, it's unrusted, and it can move away, or it's just kind of gray in color, and it's black on the top because the organic matter doesn't decompose, so that's a very wet soil. If you got a soil where the water table comes and goes, then you get these gray spots with brown soil color, and I can tell you how long the water table is there by what is the predominant color. If it's more brown, then the water table's not there long with just a few gray spots. If it's mostly gray with a few brown or red spots, it's wet a long time. That's how we can tell. For septic system sizing, there are 3 considerations that you have to be aware of. One of them is the soil texture. Like I said, clay soils, you need a big system. Sandy soils, you need a smaller system. The amount of wastewater being generated obviously matters. And then there's the clogging of the soil pores, because some particles escape from the septic tank, and the microbes that are decomposing that organic matter form what we call a biomat, which causes some clogging of the soil. In my business, it's called the long-term acceptance rate. That's why you need a big footprint to put not that much water into the ground, because it gets this biomat. And I can tell you the biomat is a very important component for treating wastewater, because it really works hard, and probably 80 to 90% of the wastewater renovation is by that biomat. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more as I go on in this talk. Most disposal systems in Maine are built above the ground because we have shallow depth to hard pan, bedrock, or water table. Traditional stone beds are being replaced today more and more by what we in the business call proprietary devices. And I'm going to show you what some of those are, because they use a smaller footprint and they can go in a smaller area, which is really pretty important. Another thing is that in a stone bed, as I said, half of the volume of the stone bed is solid stone and the other half is pore space. Well, if you got a concrete chamber, all the area underneath it is available to hold water, so you can hold more water in a smaller area. And one of the other things that happens is some of these proprietary devices help reduce the organic material in the waste stream. If it's cleaner water, it can go into the ground quicker, so you need a smaller footprint. So some of the proprietary disposal field devices, concrete chambers, have been around for a very long time. And now you'll see more often these plastic chambers that are very lightweight, and not only can they hold water without soil or stone reducing the volume, but you can put them in rows and step down the hill, so water comes into this row, fills up if it needs to, goes out this pipe into this row, and if it needs to, can come down and down this row. And by doing that, you can have a sloping site with 3 rows and save a lot of fill. If it's a stone bed, it has to be perfectly level, so you'd have a lot of fill, and it looks like a ski jump, so people like these because they take up less room. Fabric wrap pipe is another proprietary device. It works like the plastic chambers, and they can be stepped down the hillside. The concrete chambers, plastic chambers, and these fabric wrap pipes will take up about half as much room as a stone bed, so they fit a little bit easier and take a lot less fill, which is a good thing if you're on a small lot. And that's showing it stepped down the hill. Here's one that I get a kick out of. They've got a pipe in here, and this is styrofoam beads with a little netting material around it. So basically, you're getting pipe and stone in one package instead of putting stone around it yourself. I'm not sure how many people use those. There are other proprietary devices that require only 25% of the footprint of a stone bed. So they can really fit in a very small area. And they are very popular around lakes and other small lots. Elgin in-drain is one of those kinds of devices. It has fabric that weaves up and down in between like egg cotton projections. And what happens is the wastewater goes down, and if it hits the bottom of the ground, like in the stone bed, it can plug up the pores, as I told you, and that slows the water down. And once the pores start getting plugged, a little bit of effluent will pond on it, so it's anaerobic, and that biomass doesn't really decompose. While with this fabric going up and down in this product, when the wastewater goes down, particles cling to that fabric that's sitting up like this, and so the water drains down, that's exposed to oxygen, and that decomposes that organic matter. So by the time the water gets down to the ground, it's pretty clean, and because it's pretty clean, you can put it into a smaller footprint than you can if there's a thicker biomat. So its biomat forms in the product itself, and that's why it can be such a small footprint, and they work pretty well, I have to say. There's another thing called EnviroFin that looks like an octopus, and water goes out into each of these little fins. It's got fabric on it again, so the water comes out and drops down, but particles collect on the sides, and that also decomposes the material, so you have cleaner water going out into the ground. So those things can be put in pretty small footprint areas. We also have, yes?
Do any of these new design systems allow being any closer to the lake?
No.
They change that specification at all?
No, they don't. And I'll get on that subject in just a minute. In fact, the next subject, which is called advanced treatment units, that's what the state septic system program requires if you're going to be putting in a system that's closer to the lake. You can't do the first-time systems. That means you never had one before. They have to be 100 feet from the lake. Replacements, you do the best you can. But if you have a replacement system and it's going to be closer to the lake, river, or stream than 100 feet, they require you to put in what's called an advanced treatment unit. And these basically, just like your commercial treatment plant. That's what they are, is a little packaged treatment plant. There are a few systems out there that just introduce oxygen into the waste stream, and that helps break down organic matter, but these things actually, some of them look like they're basically little packaged treatment plants. So their primary function is to reduce the BOD5 and total suspended solids, so it's cleaner water coming out. They can get rid of some bacteria, and they also can reduce the nitrogen if that's desired.
Excuse me, what's a BOD5?
Pardon?
BOD5, what is that?
Basically, it's just the organic material that's going out into the waste stream, so that there's no organic matter, then it won't plug up the system as quickly. So they allow you to put in a very small footprint, 25% of a stone bed, but they also don't have a biomat. And like I said, in my opinion, the biomat is a good thing in that it does provide a lot of treatment of the wastewater stream. The price ranges for a lot of these is in the $2,000 to probably $5,000 range. And there's one that's $20,000. It's reverse osmosis. The people that sell it will stand with a glass on the other side of the membrane and drink it, but I'm not there yet. So basically, an advanced one of these ATU'S is, you can get them in a septic tank, 1,000-gallon septic tank. What they do is they pump up water, it sprays down onto these bags of foam or beads or something where the microbes attack the waste stream. It drips down, it keeps doing it until the water's pretty clean and it gets pumped off to the drain field. So it's removing a lot of the organic material out of the waste stream. And this is just showing you another one that pumps air into the tank. And if you put oxygen into it, you'll get more decomposition. It's very critical that you have, if you have one of these advanced treatment units, that you have a maintenance contract. The state requires you to do that for, I think it's a period of 2 or 3 years. But in my opinion, you really need to do that indefinitely because nobody knows how to maintain these things. And if they don't get maintained, you're probably going to have it fail. And if it fails, it can be a pretty expensive price tag. This gives you an idea of one of those advanced treatment units, the BOD5 and the total suspended solids, which is the organic components, 95% reduction. They can get rid of a lot of the nitrogen and even the coliforms. What you don't see up there is phosphorus and viruses. And as we know, that's important in lake watersheds. This is what the water looks like after it comes out of one of those advanced treatment units as compared to coming out of a regular septic tank. It looks like there's a world of difference, and there is as far as clogging material goes. But as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of like almost a little deceptive because you think that's great, but it's maybe not as great if you're in a lake watershed. And that's one of those packaged treatment plants called Septic. It's inside there. And that's down on an island off the coast where they put these things. And they didn't have any roads, they had no material. It was going to cost an incredible amount of money to put in regular septic systems. They put these in. They used drip irrigation to, they used ultraviolet to kill pathogens, and then they used drip irrigation in their flower beds and did a great job of taking care of their waste. And these units can, after the season's over in the fall, just keep pumping the solids up until they break it down, so you don't even have to have the septic tank pumped out on the islands. It can just works itself until everything's clean, and then they shut off for the winter. And this is an emitter for drip irrigation type systems, which are allowed. They can be either put on top of the ground, underneath bark mulch or wood chips, or they can be put shallow into the ground. There's 2 different kinds of systems that are out there. This is just showing one that has, I'll get a better picture. This is the network of piping for one that's going to be covered with soil. And this is one that actually has, that's actually bark mulch. It runs off down through there, and that's what that system looks like. So if you're on an island, you don't have much room to work, you can put one of these things down, cover it bark mulch, and they work pretty well. And this is down off that island that I showed you earlier. They put drip irrigation pipes into their flower beds, and the flowers were obviously quite happy with that water and nutrient supply. But like I said, one of the issues of concern is that none of the advanced treatment units currently available will remove phosphorus or viruses. There is one, when I went to the Maine Association of Site Evaluators annual conference this March, and I talked with all the vendors out there. One of the vendors says that they have a product that will do that, but it's not available in this country yet. It's available in Europe, and it uses some kind of an iron aluminum slag material that it pushes the water through to remove the phosphorus. And apparently it works pretty well and for an extended period of time. And I told them that if they would make that available in this country, that I think they could get a lot of business. So hopefully they're looking into it. I mentioned about the viruses. Phosphorus and viruses, as far as I'm concerned, are not a real big concern if the disposal field is installed in the topsoil layer or in a fine textured soil. You know, in all of our soils in the state of Maine, even our sands and gravels, when the glaciers first melted and left, the ground was bare for a long time before it got vegetated. And there was a lot of wind, and the wind blew a lot. So even our sand and gravel have a topsoil layer. It can be 6 inches, it can be 2 feet thick of wind-blown, very fine sand and silt. That does an excellent job of providing treatment for wastewater. It's got cation exchange capacity, aluminum and iron. So if you put the system in that layer, it's also biologically active. It's where the most of the plant roots are. You're in great shape. The problem is if you got sand and gravel and you put it down into the sand and gravel, that layer has very little iron, aluminum, no cation exchange capacity. It's very aerobic. You get almost no treatment. And so that's what I think one of the biggest concerns is. And if you live in a lake watershed, obviously you should be concerned about soils that are very coarse textured. Yeah, I got the clock up there, so thank you. So, shallow to bedrock soils, that's another issue. If you've got old septic systems in your watershed and they're still working after 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and it's shallow to bedrock or sand and gravel, the odds are it's into the sand and gravel or it's on top of fractured bedrock. And I have some stories I could tell you, but I don't have enough time probably, so I'll move on. And another concern I have in coarse textured soils is you don't have a biomat. So the water can just go straight down into the groundwater table, and if it's carrying phosphorus and nitrogen and viruses, then all of those are going right out into the lake, especially if they're very close to the lake. So, and I was at a meeting in April with the DEP as they were updating their non-point source management strategy, and septic systems were part of the discussion that I was there too. And the state septic system program manager mentioned that every system that goes in less than 100 feet from the lake, they require advanced treatment units. And I said, that's not necessarily a good thing because you get no biomat. So if you're 40 feet from the lake in sand or gravel and you're discharging all that wastewater with nothing to slow it down in sand or gravel, then 100% of the phosphorus and viruses is going because that's not removed by advanced treatment. So I said, you really should rethink this. And, you know, if it was me, I would say I want that thing to be installed in the topsoil layer. It's where all the plant roots are, all the microbes, iron, aluminum, that's where the treatment occurs. So I think that sounds great, but I think it's not as good as it sounds. So if I was concerned about lake water quality and had a lot of sandy, gravelly soils, that's what I'd say. New systems are probably not going to be a problem if it's shallow to bedrock because we require 24-inch separation above bedrock, and probably you're going to get that 24-inch separation. Old systems probably didn't, and that may be why they're still working. In fact, I think a lot of coastal systems, I think that's a big problem with clam flats and water quality around beaches because there's a lot of bedrock around the coast and there's a lot of old systems that are just sitting on bedrock cracks and they just disappear. So, a little bit about septic system failures. They could happen because of plugged pipes and crushed pipes. Those get fixed pretty quickly because people don't like them. if they can't flush their toilet. Hydraulic failures are probably our most common type of problem. Short circuits is the one that nobody even thinks about, but is probably the one that's the biggest problem. Like I said, plug pipes are not really an environmental threat. If your pipe plugs up and your toilet runs across the floor, you're probably going to fix it, right? But the hydraulic failure is the one that happens the most often and can be an environmental threat depending on where it is. You know, if it's on your front lawn and effluent comes to the surface, you're probably going to fix it because it doesn't look good, it smells bad, and the dog will roll in it and come in the house. If it's out back in the bushes, you may not. So the three reasons why it can fail hydraulically are because it's not designed properly, it's not installed properly, or it's not maintained properly. Design and installation are not a problem today, generally speaking, because we have lots of training out there. It's the maintenance part that's really an issue that people don't understand. I brought on that table copies of what I call septic system user notes. It's what I've accumulated over my career in understanding about septic systems that homeowners should know. Okay, everybody who has a septic system should read that and understand it and listen to it. So pick up a copy. Yes.
What are the signs of, how do we identify if a hydraulic failure has occurred or other type of failure? Like if we're, as part of a lake association, if homeowner says, can you, we think our septic system is failing or it's okay, can you take a look at it?
You'll have a soft, spongy, soupy thing that you'll see. So those are pretty easy to find.
Are there other things that we have on occasion actually tested water quality for E. coli in front of places that have been suspicious and have confirmed with really high E. coli levels that there's a real problem. But, when we're going out, what are some other things we should look for? Spongy grass?
I'll be getting into that in my next 6 minutes.
Okay. Sorry.
5. I thought I had 6. Okay, well, we'll speed up for some of this stuff here and get down to this. What I'm going to show you now is that biomat that forms in a typical septic system. And this is a biomat that got too thick. That causes hydraulic failure. So it's good to have one. You don't want it too thick. This is plastic chambers. They got too much stuff out into it because the septic tank didn't get pumped. That sort of stuff is what you look for, and you'll see, and it's not a good thing, and it's easy to detect, those kinds of things. But what you don't see is the short circuits, okay? If a septic system is installed on top of this and you get cracks, the wastewater just goes right down to the groundwater table, zero treatment. Or if it's in sand and gravel and you put it down into this layer, it's gone. That's the one that's the most concern. And I have been working with DEP and the state septic system program folks to impress upon them the need to incorporate something like this for septic system inspections in sandy, gravelly, shallow bedrock soils in the shoreland zone, because these can be a smoking gun that you don't necessarily know is there, but it's a little bit tricky to get that to happen. Straight pipes, we don't like those. Dye doesn't work unless you get a straight pipe, unfortunately. I do want to talk to you a little bit about septic system maintenance. And again, get a copy of my septic system user notes, because, a septic system can cost you $15,000 in the shoreland zone. And so if you don't maintain what you got, they can be very expensive, they can be ugly, the replacement. So pump your tank out every 3 to 5 years. If that's more often than you needed, that's better. It's like having your oil changed in the car. You can do it every 30,000 miles and hope, or you can do it every 5,000 or 6,000 miles, and okay, maybe that's overkill, but the car's still running. Ridex, that sort of stuff, don't ever put that down your tank. There is nothing recognized in the United States of America that will help your septic system work that you can add to it. Nothing. If you're lucky, it won't do any harm. If you're lucky. And if you're not lucky, it'll cause so much biologic activity that it'll put solids out in your drain field and cause them to fail. I've seen quite a few where that's happened, so don't put it in. Yes?
That includes a package of yeast?
Yes, don't put anything in. It's competing with what belongs there, so nothing. There are several ways you can repair a failing septic system, but most of the time, you'd have to add, if it's hydraulically failed, you can add oxygen and reduce the amount of usage that might bring it back, but generally speaking, you gotta have it replaced. I did mention about the short circuiting. DEP is proposing perhaps to come up with an advanced septic system inspection program. They'll be looking in the system for biomat, and if you've got no biomat, you're in sand and gravel or manufactured bedrock and there's no biomat, you probably got a short circuit, something you need to be aware of. So, I mentioned that. If you want to know what you have for soils in your lake watershed area, there's a thing called the Web Soil Survey. Anybody here ever heard of the Web Soil Survey? Good. Basically, you can Google Web Soil Survey, click on it, click on the home page, click on the start button. You can put your address in, and you can find out what the soils are in your lake watershed area. If you got shallow to bedrock soils, you got sandy gravelly soils, those are hot spot potentials. And if you got old septic systems in those areas, those are things you really want to be paying attention to. So, if I had to rate which ones you want to be the most concerned about, there are systems out there that have been in since 1974. They almost always should just be removed. Because if they're still working, it's only because they're probably a short circuit or they're not used. Pre-1995 is the next one, because in 1995 I got the septic system rules to require putting in some finer textured soil around the disposal field if it's going in very coarse sand and gravel. And so now that's in there. So those are the highest priority in advanced treatment systems that are in sandy or shallow soils right near the lake. That would be my priority list.
Is there any difference in the effluent that is from a gravity system that feeds from the tank to the...
No.
Or a pump up?
No.
No?
No, there's zero difference, unless it's an advanced treatment unit that pumps it up, then there is. Yes?
Any advice on what can and cannot be put on top? A lot of people just let weeds and things grow on them.
Oh, the plants, you
The
mean?
plants that are
Yeah,
growing on top.
nothing that's gonna have a lot of deep roots. You know, you can, herbaceous stuff is fine, but not brush and certainly not trees, because they will put roots down in and...
Vegetables, any problem with growing vegetables on them?
You should not put vegetables on, because they can absorb pathogens and they can be incorporated into their tissues, and so I would not do that. Yes?
The pumping every 2 to 5 years, would that apply to year-round homes as well as seasonal homes?
Yeah, the thing I would do is, if you pump it out, say, after 2 or 3 years and you don't use it much and it's seasonal, ask the pumper what condition it was in. He'd say you didn't really need it. Then go another year, or another year. And so, yes, if it's seasonal, there'll be some decomposition during the off-season, so it does matter, but the pumper will tell you what condition it is in, so that's the best way to do that. Yes?
On your list of concerns, you started with pre-1974, and it sounded like those should just kind of be replaced. On the items number 2 and 3, what should you do? Should you replace those, or should you just check those to make sure that they're functioning properly?
If it's pre-1974, nobody knows what it is. It's pretty hard to check it, because you don't even know hardly where it is. If it's pre-1995, you do know where it is, supposedly. And so you can check that, and if it's got a biomat, then it's not short circuiting. If it doesn't have a biomat, then it's short circuiting. So the trick is to get people in the shoreland zone that have these old systems to let you look at them, because they probably won't. That's been my experience, because they have a suspicion that it's not great and they don't want to take a chance, because it would be $15,000 and who knows what, so that's the trick.
Where do you check for the biomat? Is that the distributor?
That's where the wastewater enters the soil surface,
No, but I mean, where do you check for it?
that's where you check.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right in the drain field itself.
Oh, you dig up around?
Yes, yeah, I use my soil auger, I can do that pretty quickly. You know, if you know what you're doing, it's pretty quick to do it. So I just had one parting thought that, you know, things can always be worse. So, thank you. One more, if anybody has any questions, that's who I am. Sometimes you can find me there. This time of year, I'm out in the field every day, but I do answer my phone calls and emails, so give me a call. Lake water quality is really important to me. I do gravel roads workshops too. I did 2 this week. So I'm available. If I can help you in your lake watershed, by all means, let me know, because that's important to me, so.
Can we distribute these?
That's what it's for. That's why I didn't have my name on it. It's anybody who wants it, so. Thank you.
Thank you, David.